Hey guys, today's video is about knowing when to give up, and there'll be more on that right after this. Hey YouTube, this is Pecktec, and I'd like to start off by thanking all my new and old subscribers for getting me over that marker of 30,000 subscribers. That was actually a couple of weeks ago, and of course I wasn't there to tape it when it rolled over. I always miss the big ones. But thank you so much for getting me there and sticking with me. Some of you guys have been watching for a really, really long time. I don't want you to think that I don't know who you are. I don't always answer the comments, not as much as I used to. I do read them all, but I don't always have an opportunity to answer them all or really acknowledge them. But please know that I read every single one of those, and I really appreciate all of you for your support. The other thing is, this is not a video about me giving up on the channel or giving up on fish keeping or anything like that, or even you giving up on fish keeping or anything like that. This is more a video about knowing when a particular aquarium project has kind of reached the pinnacle of where it's going to be, maybe avoiding old tank syndrome or just a failed project, a failed start that didn't really work out the way you wanted, and not being afraid to just start it all over. One thing you guys might have picked up if you watched my channel or a lot of other aquarium channels is that hobbyists that are also YouTubers do their tanks a little bit differently than I would think a typical person would do. There are all kinds of decisions I make because I have a show that I probably wouldn't make if nobody was watching. It's super easy to be content with a project that you've let go on for a year or so. You know, if all the fish seem happy and you've got some plants that are doing okay, it's kind of okay to ignore that and just let it go and stuff. When you've got to show big, beautiful tanks every week, there is a tendency to go, yeah, you know what? I've given you a try. I've given you a little time. I think I'm just gonna nuke it from orbit and start over. I've been on YouTube for, I think, 4 or 5 years now. I've actually kind of lost track of how long I've actually been making videos. And one thing I've definitely learned is that on some of my tanks, I just let them go too long. I had a 30-gallon that was up for probably 3 or 4 years. Like, it was an old tank before I even made my first video. And it took a long time to get me to finally take it apart. Part of it was trying to catch the hundreds and hundreds of cherry red shrimp out of there. I knew that was going to be a pain, as well as just all the regular fish. And what was I going to do with them? Where was I going to put them? Of course, I've got a lot of tanks, and a lot of them aren't super full. So what will happen is all these small fish will kind of end up being piled into one tank here or there. So that's not always a problem for me because I've fully acknowledged my MTS, and I've got tanks. I've got tank space. I've got tank space in a lot of different places. That being said, these days it's really easy to head down to Petco or Pet Supplies Plus for their $1 per gallon sale and pick up a 10-gallon, 20-gallon, 40-gallon, whatever you need. I got a whole 55-gallon when I moved the stuff out of the living room to redo the floors, and just set up a tank that's only meant to be temporary. And if you don't need it when it's over, you can yard sell it, throw it on Craigslist, Facebook, help. You can give it to a local club or just a friend that you know. In fact, I've got a whole garage full of aquariums that I'm probably going to have to purge over to a friend's house or something like that. Just give them some new tanks. But I was definitely guilty, especially with these smaller tanks like the Specs, of just letting them go on and on and on. So long as they looked okay, and the fish seemed happy, there was no point in tearing them down. And while that's fine for the most part, there's a certain amount of enjoyment from just starting a tank up from scratch. And instead of taking your 18 tanks and adding number 19, sometimes it makes more sense to take out 3 and build one more good one, or redo one good one. I was on a live stream with Mike from Mass Aquariums the other day, on his channel, and he was talking to me about all the tanks, and he was like, Peck, do you have a chance to enjoy all those aquariums? And really the answer is no. I mean, I do in brief doses, and I really love every tank that I've set up, but I don't really get to sit in front of them and mess with them overly like you might if you had, 4 or 5 aquariums. The sheer volume of aquariums that you have to mess with decreases like really the quality of life for all the inhabitants of those tanks. Now, of course, you got to recognize that I'm saying this as someone that works full time. I work at least 40, sometimes 60 hours a week at my regular job. Even the act of making this video, like maybe I'll film, let's say it's a video that's not me opening products, right? Opening products is just, I buy stuff off the internet and I show it to you, right? If I do a project, like if I'm working on the pond or I'm setting up a new tank or something like that, then it's a much bigger deal because I've got all the time it takes to do that and film it, which is about twice as long as normal. Then I've got to take that film and arrange it into a nice, attractive video for you guys, and I spend a lot more time on that than I probably should. So between my full-time job, 40 to 60 hours, and the average YouTube video, which, a simple video like just me opening products from last week, I can shoot that video and edit it in about 4 or 5 hours. If it's a particularly long video, it takes a long time, because usually I fall asleep 2 or 3 times while I'm trying to put it together. This video took several days of all the aquarium maintenance that I had to do, like dismantling tanks, getting the fish moved, cleaning things up after I was done, all that. I mean, this was almost all of Saturday, almost all of Monday, and part of Tuesday. Even the part that you're watching right now, this is my second run through. So I've already spent the 20 minutes or so it takes to sit here and narrate this part of it. And of course, all this excludes like just doing regular aquarium maintenance. The most time I spend with my tanks is doing water changes. And when I do water changes, that gives me an opportunity to stop, acknowledge what's going on in there, pull out some water while I deal with algae, trim plants, examine all the fish really carefully and that sort of thing. But I want more than that. I don't want to just deal with it when I have to work. That makes me not like them as much. So I guess what I'm trying to get to in a roundabout way is it was long overdue for me to start trimming down a little bit of what I've got going on. Having the big tank downstairs has made me realize like how much more fun it is to have one huge tank than it is to have several little tiny tanks. I think there's something to be said for the quality of life in these larger tanks too. And I'm perfectly okay with making a really cool 20-gallon and putting one betta in there. That's fine with me. So yes, you're going to see some stuff going down today. We actually had time for a little bit of a creative project for sort of a temporary tank that I'm excited to show you. I call it my ception tank. And we completely break down a couple of others and get one prepped to reset. So without further ado, let's get into all of that now. Now, as I look around upstairs at my tanks, I'm overall pretty happy with most of them. There's a lot of stuff. I want to see what happens with a lot of these tanks. I'm not ready to stop on them now, especially these that I've worked super hard to put together, or these that I've kind of brought back from the brink. This one especially, man, it was crazy with hair algae. Now, I've let the frog bit go a little bit nuts in here, but it sure took care of the hair algae. That's pretty much all gone, but I probably ought to clean it out so I can actually see in there. It's getting kind of dark. That being said, there's a few tanks that I do need to redo. First of all, the flex here. I like the shape of the tank. I like this tank, but it needs to change. I mean, it's got terrible algae problems. Like all the rocks are just covered. Some of the plants have started to recover, but it's not been great overall. Now, right next to it here, we have the zombie tank. Now, this is sort of a similar situation. A lot of the plants had kind of melted away. Now, they're back. Like, they're actually recovered and doing really well. So I'm going to attempt to save as many of the plants out of this one as I can. In fact, I'm pretty sure I can pull almost all these plants out and use them in other places or save them for later. And right next to that, we've got this little tank. It's doing pretty good overall. The plants in it are all right. It's way overgrown. I've got kind of a special idea for that, and I'll share it with you in just a little bit. But it's going to change too. Now, in my bedroom, I've got this 10-gallon that I set up kind of as a holding area for these tetras that I moved out. I'm going to put them in the big 56-gallon cube. The baby rainbows that are in there, I think, are now big enough to where they won't get eaten by these guys. They don't seem to like it in this tank very much. They're always hiding under the log and stuff, so I think they're really going to like it in their new home. So this is sort of a partial breakdown and bring back up of this tank. It's got a couple of plants in it that aren't doing too bad. This particular log, it had a couple of plants that I thought I could use, but the log had a lot of algae on it too, so I probably will just kind of decommission that or put it on the shelf for another project later on and just let the algae die out. But after I got all the aquascaping stuff that I could get out of there, I went in for the fish. I was complaining to Rachel O'Leary once about trying to catch Cory cats and what a pain in the ass it was. And she's like, use a bigger net, which is funny. It's funny that it's such a simple solution. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't think of that before. But I've got my big, huge net for this project, and I was glad I did because it made the whole thing a lot simpler. Now, of course, now that the tank is empty and devoid of any life, I decided to clean out that sponge filter really good. And I just kind of cleaned it out and what was left of the water. Then I drained it all and cleaned that tank up. I went ahead and just put the tank where the 10-gallon that I used to have was, the one I gave to my sister. I just kind of set it up on that stand and got it ready to hold the fish and stuff that I was about to pull out. Now it's time to start on this little half-gallon tank. The first thing I did was pull off the equipment. I got the light off there. I'm not sure if that light's still useful. Then I pulled the filter. Then, of course, I dropped the filter behind the aquarium onto the carpet where all the muddy, gross stuff was. It was really, really terrible to clean that up, too. I'll tell you what, there was about 30 minutes of cursing involved. Once I got that thing drained, I decided I wanted to try something I hadn't tried before. It's sort of a tank in a tank. Tankception. So what I did was I took the tank, I pulled off any material like that black background that I wasn't going to need, and I just started pulling out all the overgrowth that was in there. It was a lot of moss. I planted some flame moss in there, and it really went berserk. There was actually a lot of cool abuse plants and stuff kind of hiding underneath there, so I had to release them and get them free. I went ahead and added the sponge filter back, and I put one of the plants that I pulled out of the original version of this tank, which is actually a really cool piece of anubis that's stuck on some little coconut hide that I'd made. I had originally planned to do something with this spec too. I was going to break it down. I'm still going to break it down, but the plants in it are very healthy and they're doing good, so I think I might wait until I set up my other tank. The only problem with this one is it's got this small duckweed problem, and I just did not feel like dealing with that, not today. So it's going to sit for a while I get everything else arranged. Since I had this tank right next to the flex and I was going to be pulling the fish and shrimp out of this flex, I decided just to go ahead and add at least half of the water from the original tank. This also made it really easy to collect a lot of the shrimp as I could just kind of suck them up in the siphon. These big hoses and stuff are great for collecting shrimp. In fact, I got more than half of the shrimp just by sort of vacuuming them up and putting them straight into the next tank. I didn't even really have to acclimate them because it was all the same water. Then I did the best I could to get that glass nice and clean. I pulled out the giant net and did the best I could to catch all the fish. This actually took a long, long time. I filmed just a few seconds of it so I could talk to you about it, but this between all the fish and the shrimp, it actually took maybe an hour and a half of just trying to net these things out. I did the best I could without pulling up any of the decorations, but eventually to really finish it off, I was going to have to remove everything. It's kind of hard to see once you start pulling stuff up, so I went ahead and netted as many as I could first. After that, I went and reclaimed as many of those rocks as I could. I'm going to clean those, maybe use them for later. Then I pulled the plants. A lot of the plants I just couldn't keep. They had algae here and there, and I'm not going to start another tank with algae to start with. So as much as I hate to waste plants and stuff like that, I did end up tossing a lot of these plants. I kept a few things that I thought I could save, but for the most part, a lot of these plants just kind of went by the wayside. I couldn't be absolutely sure that I got every single shrimp, so I decided to do this, which is dump it into the pond. I went ahead and I let the substrate fall in there too, because that substrate actually never goes bad, that particular type of substrate, and I thought it might be useful in the bottom of the pond. Now my next project is the zombie head tank. Now this tank I thought was really, really interesting, but it was just kind of a pain to keep. It was just another tank that wasn't, other than having a face in there, wasn't anything super special about it. And I thought about putting it in the bedroom, but I didn't want it to like stare at me all night, so I decided just to go ahead and break it down. The plants in it, though, are really, really good. They're actually really healthy in here, and I decided to kind of devise a plan wherein I could save as many of these as possible. And besides the fish and the shrimp, this has another great resource, which is snails. Now that I have puffers, these pond snails are just great food, and they're free food, so I'm going to pull those too. So in the tankception tank, I started to kind of play around with some different containers and see what maybe I'd want to try to recover some plants into. I toyed with the idea of using those mason jar, kind of plastic mason jar things that I got from my aquarium box, but in the end, I found this bowl that fit really well, and I decided to use that instead. So I went through and I started, of course, collecting snails and collecting the 2 fish that were in there. I ended up putting those Moscow guppies in my 56 gallon. And then I went and grabbed as much of the furniture as I could, and then I started gently pulling plants. I grabbed a bunch of shrimp at this point, but I couldn't believe how many shrimp were in this tank. It was actually kind of ridiculous. There was just tons and tons of them. So eventually I just decided just to start pulling plants. I pulled every single plant that is in this tank out and managed to get it all replanted. I used the exact same substrate that was in there. And the way I did this was kind of interesting. So I took substrate out and I kind of made a layer on the bottom of this bowl. I ended up using about 2 scoops of substrate. It seemed to be a pretty decent amount to kind of get the base layer going. Then I started adding plants. The first couple of plants I planted into the existing substrate. And then after a while, what I started to do was just leave the roots towards the middle on top. And I just kind of went around in a circle, and I kept adding the plants until they were all in there with their roots kind of congregating there in the middle. And once I got everything in there, I just put a small layer of substrate on top of them, and boom, instant planting. It made a nice, attractive little bowl of plants. They're all in the same substrate that they were before. Hopefully that'll help. It'll help them not melt so bad. I tried to leave their root structure really intact so they'd have plenty to eat off of. The other thing I salvaged out of this tank was this filter. I didn't want to have any problems with this tank, and I know the existing substrate that I got from both the small tank and the stuff that I used to plant this are going to help a lot with the bioload, with the existing bacteria that's already in that substrate. And of course the sponge filter is going to do a good job too, but the combination of all these things I was hoping would really make sure that this tank didn't have any algae spikes or anything bizarre happening in the short term while I got things going. And of course, I put the remaining shrimp, the couple of shrimp I couldn't catch, and the remaining substrate into the pond, just like the flex. Then I went and cleaned everything out and made sure it was ready for whatever happens next with this tank. Basically, it's going on my shelf. And so there we have the tankception tank. This is a temporary project. I know as soon as this little aquarium has algae on both sides of it, I'm going to regret this. But for now, it's kind of an interesting thing. It's just kind of a fun little project. And it's a way to keep and hold those plants until I get around to getting that flex replanted. So right now the room looks kind of funky. There's big gaps there where tanks used to be and that sort of thing. I'm going to have to rearrange a little bit. I think I'm going to wait till the next water change before I really start moving tanks around again. I'll try a couple of different arrangements while the tank's empty and just try to, figure out what's going to work best, what's going to look nice in there. I was glad to see all the fish baited. They all seem pretty happy in there. These little guys are great. They don't require heaters. They like low flow, but they just don't seem to mind having the 2 filters in there. I was kind of relieved at that. And they're all swimming around and congregating really well, and the shrimp are running around. It's funny, the shrimp tend to hang out inside that little tank. So I guess they like the substrate in there or something, but I see them around everywhere, but they tend to hang out inside the small tank, which I thought was kind of neat. It'll be something neat to look at while I wait for inspiration for the Fluval Flex. I've got a couple of ideas that I really like to do. I'm not sure if I'll be able to pull them off, but you'll hear more about that soon. All right, folks, so that's all I got on that. I really hope you guys enjoyed my little explanation for what I'm doing. I probably will be getting rid of even more tanks. I have not decided exactly what I want to deal with and what I don't. A couple of these that are still looking really good, I might just give to some friends, or maybe I was contemplating maybe taking one of these to work and making it my work tank. But I still haven't decided 100% like how I want to pursue that, so more on that later. It's mostly a time thing for me, partially a video content thing for me too. Making weekly content for videos is hard. I haven't missed a week in over 3 years. That's 3 years every Sunday without a break. And even when I couldn't do a regular video, I did a live stream. That being said, just a fair warning to you guys, there'll probably be a little bit more of that. But I hope it didn't scare anyone. I'm not looking to quit YouTube. I could use a break. But I'm not looking to quit YouTube or anything like that anytime soon. You'll be able to enjoy your weekly Pecktec content until I just can't do it anymore. There is an experiment. I don't know if I'll get it started this week or maybe it'll be for next week. But I've become obsessed with board games. When I get into stuff, I really, really get into stuff. And lately, board games have been encompassing everything in my consciousness. I even took all the games that I stored behind here. I showed you a couple of videos ago. And I've set up a whole new area right over here just to store them and observe them. I've also been super, super active on Kickstarter. And if you guys are friends with me on Facebook, you can use that to follow me on Kickstarter if you want to see what I'm up to on there. Not a ton of aquarium stuff on Kickstarter, but what they do have is a new board game. At least 20 or 30 new board games every week. It is crazy. I had no idea there was so much going on there. And I've already backed like 4 or 5 products that next year I'm going to be up to here in board games. But I just got a game a couple of weeks ago that I really, really like. And what I might do is kind of show it to you. It's coming on general retail. It was a Kickstarter project, but it's going to be for sale in retail stores starting next month. So it might be a game you like too, and I'm just going to share it. We're going to talk about it and stuff. And what I think I might do is a couple of other board games. I might do not a weekly thing, maybe a bi-weekly thing, maybe twice a month, kind of like I did with the movie reviews. A lot of times on this channel, it's never been just a fish channel. It's always just kind of stuff I like. The fish are always on Sunday, but what I might do is like some other videos during the week. I might do a couple of board game videos. I'm going to a big board game convention called Gen Con. It's the world's largest board game convention, and that's happening at the end of the summer in August. So I think between now and August, I'm going to put together a few board game videos and just kind of test the waters, see how I like that sort of thing. I really love doing the movie reviews with Keifel. Actually, we've been on more of a scheduling thing lately where it just doesn't work out. He's finishing up school and doing some other political stuff now. And of course, my responsibilities at work have greatly increased. So we just haven't had as much time to go to the movies as we'd like. But I would like to kind of bring that back. I think I even liked it enough to make a whole channel, but I don't want to commit to that just yet. That's all I got to say about that stuff. Guys, thank you for watching. Follow your bliss, keep a clean tank, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye. On a weekly plan. I hope it didn't scare anyone. I won't be. Like, I have all these. I am coming right after this. Coming right up. When to give up? Coming right up. And sometimes a do-over, a complete do-over, isn't exactly. A couple of years ago, I realized something because